April 21st, 1945. A ridge above the Italian village of San Terenzo. 20-year-old Second Lieutenant Daniel Inouye was already bleeding from a bullet through his stomach. He kept climbing. 3 German machine gun nests were firing down the slope. He silenced the first with 2 grenades. He killed the second crew with his Thompson. He pulled the pin on a 3rd grenade, and that's when a German rifle grenade hit him. It nearly severed his right arm at the elbow. His arm hung at his side. The live grenade was still clutched in the fist he could no longer control. He yelled at his men to stay back. Then he used his left hand to pry the grenade loose from his own dead fingers and threw it into the last bunker. Then he kept going. He was shot in the leg. He fell unconscious down the ridge. When he came to, he looked up at his men gathered around him and told them to get back up that hill. Nobody called off the war. This is the story of Daniel Inouye and the regiment that should never have existed. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Daniel Inouye was 17 years old. He heard the planes before he saw them. He ran to help treat the wounded, a Red Cross volunteer, a boy who wanted to be a surgeon. Then, within weeks, the United States government issued a directive. Americans of Japanese ancestry were reclassified, not citizens, enemy aliens. Daniel Inouye could not enlist. He was the enemy. This is Echoes of Valor X. Today we tell the true story of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team and the young man from Honolulu who gave everything to a country that wasn't sure it wanted him. Daniel Ken Inouye was born September 7th, 1924, in Honolulu, Hawaii, the son of Japanese immigrants who had crossed an ocean to build a life in America. His father worked to put food on the table. His mother raised him to believe in 2 things: family and duty. By the time Daniel was in high school, he had one plan: medical school. He would become a surgeon. Then Pearl Harbor happened, and the United States turned on its own people. President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066 in February 1942. Over 100,000 Japanese Americans were forced from their homes, given 48 hours, loaded into buses, sent to internment camps, tar paper barracks behind barbed wire, in the California desert, in the Arkansas flatlands. American citizens, no trials, no charges. Daniel Inouye was not interned. Hawaii was under military rule, not the exclusion order. But he was still an enemy alien. He could not serve, so he petitioned. He and thousands of other Japanese American men wrote letters, made arguments, appeared before boards, demanding the right to fight for the country that had just called them the enemy. In January 1943, President Roosevelt reversed course. Japanese Americans could now volunteer. When the announcement was made at a meeting in Honolulu, Inouye later recalled the room exploding, men shouting, running, racing each other to the draft board, 3 miles away. I was among the first 75, he said. He was 18 years old. He left medical school behind and never looked back. He enlisted in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. Their motto, go for broke. In Hawaii gambling slang, it meant to risk everything on one throw of the dice. For these men, it wasn't a choice. It was the only move they had. The 442nd trained at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, 1943. The men from Hawaii and the men from the mainland barely spoke at first. The islanders, the Nisei from Hawaii, couldn't understand why the mainland men were so quiet, so angry. Then they were taken to visit a Japanese-American internment camp in Arkansas. The bus rolled past the guard towers, past the machine guns pointed inward, past the barracks where whole families were crammed into single rooms with no privacy. The men from Hawaii went silent. They finally understood. After that, there were no more arguments. The 442nd became, as one soldier put it, a tightly clenched fist. They deployed to Italy in May 1944. Inouye was promoted to sergeant within 3 months of combat. They fought up the Italian peninsula, up through the Rome-Arno campaign, up through towns the Germans had turned into fortresses. Then they were transferred to France. The Vosges Mountains, October 1944. The forest was so thick, air support was useless. The terrain hadn't been breached by any army since the Roman Empire. And a unit of 211 Texas soldiers, the 1st Battalion, of the 141st Regiment had pushed too far forward. The Germans surrounded them. Cut off, no food, no water, running low on ammunition. 3 separate rescue attempts had already failed. General Dahlquist ordered the 442nd back into the forest. They had just come off the line. They were exhausted. They went anyway. 6 days of frontal assault through rain and mud and booby traps. No room to maneuver, only straight ahead. On October 30th, the 442nd broke through. 211 Texans walked out alive. The cost? 800 casualties in the 442nd. They had traded nearly 4 of their own men for every one they saved. When Dahlquist called a parade on November 12th to honor them, he looked out at the formation and demanded to know where the rest of the regiment was. The commanding officer looked back at him. "Sir, you are looking at the entire regiment." One company had 17 men left. The 442nd was pulled back to Italy in the spring of 1945. The war in Europe was nearly over. The German Gothic Line, the last major defensive fortification in northern Italy, still held. In April, the 442nd was attached to the 92nd Infantry Division and ordered to break it. April 21st, 1945. Here's where it gets strange. On the morning of the assault, Daniel Inouye realized he had lost his lucky silver dollars, 2 coins he carried in his chest pocket. He went anyway. His platoon moved toward a heavily defended ridge, Colle Musatello, near San Terenzo. 3 German machine gun nests commanded the slope. No cover. Inouye crawled up alone to within 5 yards of the first emplacement. He was shot through the stomach. The bullet entered his abdomen and exited his back. He pulled the pin on a grenade and threw it, destroyed the nest. He stood and killed the 2nd machine gun crew with his Thompson submachine gun. He was still bleeding from the stomach. He moved to the 3rd nest. He pulled the pin on another grenade, and a German rifle grenade hit his right arm at the elbow. The arm was nearly severed. The live grenade was locked in the fist of a hand he could no longer control. Inouye's men started toward him. He screamed at them to stay back. Then, with his left hand, he pried the grenade from his own dead fingers. He threw it into the bunker. He picked up his Thompson with his one good hand and kept firing. Then a bullet hit his leg, and he fell unconscious down the ridge. When he came to, his men were huddled over him. He looked up at them. Nobody called off the war. He refused evacuation until his men were in defensive positions. The ridge was taken. 25 Germans were killed, 8 captured. At the field hospital, surgeons found they had given him too much morphine at the aid station. There was none left to use as anesthesia. They amputated what remained of his right arm while he was awake. The war in Europe ended 18 days later. Daniel Inouye spent 20 months in rehabilitation at Percy Jones Army Hospital in Michigan. In the bed next to him, a young Kansas soldier named Bob Dole, who had also lost the use of his right arm in Italy. 2 men, 2 wars, 1 ward. They played cards together. Inouye had wanted to be a surgeon. That was gone now. He had 1 arm. He was 20 years old. He went to law school instead. In 1959, when Hawaii became the 50th state of the United States, Daniel Inouye became the first Japanese American elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. In 1962, he was elected to the Senate. He served for nearly 50 years, the most senior senator in American history, 3rd in the line of presidential succession. He was initially awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions on that ridge in Italy. For decades, that was all. In the year 2000, 55 years after the fact, President Bill Clinton upgraded the award. Daniel Inouye received the Medal of Honor. He stood in the East Room of the White House in his Senate suit, his left hand at his side, his right sleeve pinned flat. "We had an extra burden," he said afterward. "It was not only serving our nation in uniform, but also proving and demonstrating a loyalty, which I'm glad to say my country has said we did." The 442nd Regimental Combat Team is the most decorated unit for its size and length of service in the entire history of the United States military. 21 Medals of Honor, over 9,000 Purple Hearts, 8 Presidential Unit citations, 18,000 men served. The original 4,000 were replaced nearly 3.5 times over. In 1946, President Harry Truman welcomed them home on the White House lawn. "You fought not only the enemy," he told them. "You fought prejudice, and you won." Some of those men had come straight from internment camps. Some of them went back to internment camps when it was over, but they had gone anyway. They called it go for broke, risk everything on one throw. Daniel Inouye died on December 17, 2012, at the age of 88. He is buried at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu, the Punch Bowl, alongside more than 400 of his brothers from the 442nd. He gave his right arm to a country that once called him an enemy. He gave the next 50 years to making sure that never happened again. America still stands because of men like this. Subscribe so these men are never forgotten.